Have you ever seen an entire staff turn a policy loophole against their boss? I worked at a grocery store in Australia for close to a decade. For the first few years, it wasn't bad at all. Management treated us with respect, and if someone couldn't make a shift, they'd work with us to find a replacement. We were rarely short-staffed, and even if we were, the place ran smoothly. It was a job, but it wasn't miserable. That all changed when our good manager retired. His replacement, let's call him Brad, came in from another store, full of ego and a vision to fix everything that wasn't broken. Brad immediately started enforcing corporate guidelines word for word, like they were carved into stone tablets. Now the company had general policies for things like staffing numbers and leave requests. They were meant to be flexible. Guidelines, not laws. The store manager had discretion, and our old boss understood that. Brad, on the other hand, took one look at the book and decided this was his Bible. The first thing he did was cut hours. Corporate said staffing should match customer traffic, but those of us who'd worked there for years knew we always needed more than the chart said to keep things from falling apart. Within weeks, shifts were shorter, the floor was understaffed, and chaos became the new normal. Customers complained, employees burned out, and Brad shrugged it all off with his favorite phrase, company policy. Then he cracked down on leave requests. The company guideline was that staff should give 2 weeks notice if they needed time off. But life doesn't always give you 2 weeks warning. Before Brad, you could ask your manager, explain the situation, and most of the time, they'd find a way to make it work. Brad wasn't having it. 2 weeks notice or nothing. Didn't matter if your grandmother passed away or if someone was covering your shift. If it wasn't written 2 weeks ahead, the answer was no. I learned this the hard way one Saturday. A friend called me with a spare ticket to a sold-out concert, my favorite artist. The show was that night. I already had a coworker lined up to cover my shift, so nobody would be left hanging. I thought Brad might see reason if I explained. Nope, he cut me off mid-sentence. Company policy is 2 weeks notice, no exceptions. That's when it hit me. If Brad wanted to play the rules are rules game, I could play too. The company also had a sick leave policy. You were entitled to 1 paid sick day without needing a doctor's note. Only if you took 2 or more days off in a row did you need medical proof. So I called him back an hour later, this time with a terrible headache. I told him there was no way I could make it in. His voice dropped into a furious mutter, something about scrambling for a last-minute replacement, and then he hung up. I went to the concert and had the time of my life. Word spread quickly. Everyone realized that if you wanted a last-minute day off, you didn't ask. You just called in sick. And since Brad had slashed our staffing already, every sick day created even more chaos. Customers lined up at unmanned registers, stock sat in the back room, and the few workers left on the floor were drowning in tasks. The irony was rich. Brad's obsession with enforcing every rule to the letter had created a situation far worse than the occasional last-minute request for leave. For almost a decade, I'd never seen so much dysfunction, and it was all because one man couldn't tell the difference between a guideline and a law. After about 6 weeks, Brad quit. The store was a disaster, and even he couldn't handle the mess he made. They replaced him with the assistant manager who'd been with us for years. She understood the balance between keeping corporate happy and actually running a functioning store. It took months to repair the damage Brad left behind, but eventually, things went back to normal. I sometimes think about how quickly a workplace can go from calm to chaos, just because one person decides to rule with an iron fist instead of common sense. Brad thought he was fixing the store, but in reality, all he did was prove how fragile a system becomes when you strip away flexibility and trust.